Welcome, friends. It's episode 9 of the Denoise podcast, where we, the Blender heads at CG Cookie, are here to discuss all things pertaining to computer graphics and its premier open source software, Blender. My name is Kent Trammell. I'm one of the instructors at CG Cookie, and today we're discussing how Blender gets used in Hollywood visual effects with Chris Parks. Chris is an artist at Barnstorm VFX, an Emmy-nominated studio that has contributed to projects like Man in the High Castle, Thor: Love and Thunder, Ghostbusters: Frozen Empire, Deadpool and Wolverine, and many more. Chris's journey from Blender hobbyist to working on Avengers Infinity War is a fascinating and insightful story for anyone interested in turning their Blender hobby into a career. We'll do an intro after the fact. Do you go by Chris or Christopher?
It doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Well, Chris Parks.
Dr. Chris.
Dr. Chris. Okay, that's we'll do that. Dr. Chris, thank you so much for joining us, especially right after your presentation at BCON LA 2024. How do you think it went, being so fresh?
I think it went all right. I mean, it's just going to be weird if I don't respond the way I just told you a second ago. So I had a little joke about Maya that was supposed to be lighthearted. And I was actually nailing it, I feel like. And then I ended it with like something. Yeah, it's not that terrible.
Did you get laughs at least?
Oh, sure.
Okay,
Sure. Because I know there's probably people who use Maya in the audience.
Yeah.
And I have coworkers who use Maya. And like I've used Maya. Maya's fine.
Yeah.
Maya's fine. The point I was trying to make is if you have tools, Maya's actually pretty usable. If you have like tools and pipeline and stuff. And that was only the point I was trying to make.
Right. Did you balance it out with a dig at Blender by chance?
Oh, did I dig at Blender?
Like it's good to be in the cult.
Right. Yeah. Oh, I think I had bits last night that I was thinking about calling Blender Luddites or cultists.
Yeah, there you go. That would have balanced it out. And,
it's kind of preaching to the choir. You don't want to get you don't want to be a heretic too much.
True. So you refer to bits, and one thing that I noticed about you, I asked you this yesterday, but frankly I can't remember the answer. Is on your LinkedIn it says that you do improv.
Did improv. Did a little bit of stand up with my friends a few years ago. One of my buddies, Avery Johnson, or actually, what does he go by now? Avery Ross. I think he goes by Avery Ross.
Okay.
Sorry, Avery. He has a little hole-in-the-wall comedy club on Hollywood, actually. Are we on Hollywood?
We are in Hollywood.
All right, cool. So just down the street. And a lot of friends and backgrounds and beginnings trying to, break into comedy with a little group I had.
Gotcha.
But, who doesn't like doing bits? So.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean...
You don't even have to want to do comedy to want to do bits.
Yeah,
doing voices. Like I love doing Ton and Andrew Price.
Impressions?
Oh yeah.
Would you?
Oh sure. So the phrase was coined by my friend Sean Myers, who was actually a coworker of mine at Barnstorm a few years ago. Because we love to joke about like how many things you can do with Blender, how many things Ton sort of imagines you can do with Blender.
Right.
And so my friend Sean Myers coined yes, Blender, you can use it to do your taxes.
Oh my goodness, that's good.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Wow. And then Andrew Price.
Blender. Today in Blender, we are going to be going over how to delete the default cube.
I am very impressed, to be honest with you, because he did a podcast with me yesterday, and I was transported for a moment. That was great.
Yeah.
Wow.
The cloth simulation.
That's awesome. Wow. So I'm very impressed by impressions. So that's you sold me, with that.
Those are pretty much the two I can do.
So it's interesting that we have a fellow instructor at CG Cookie called Wayne Dixon, and he also did stand up. That's in his history.
Oh, okay.
And so I'm fascinated by like how that skill set could inform animation or how you problem solve. Like,
yeah. That's an interesting way to think about it. I've had this opinion for a long time, which is anything that you're learning, as long as you're actually learning something. I mean, there are things you can be learning that actually don't mean anything. So as long as you are learning something qualitative in any field, I feel like all actual knowledge is transferable. So if you're learning something wrong, you can't transfer that to another trade. But if you're learning something that, in the end actually proves to be of substance in some other trade or fashion, you can transfer that to anything. So, if you're in, I don't know, plumbing or something and you're a good plumber, there's obviously disciplines on that you could use in
Right. Absolutely.
VFX or whatever. So when it comes to me thinking about like comedy, I guess comedy is closer to an art form like VFX. So there's obviously things just like as artists that you can transfer. But I guess what you're maybe wanting to get into is something more specific.
Not necessarily. I think that's pretty profound what you just said.
Sure. Great. Dr.
Chris showing up big. Wow. Yeah, I think something that I find very beautiful about computer graphics, at least in my journey, is how much it has informed me about the world, right? At a writing level or material level or
right. Okay, yeah, just in that sense. I think even differently than I have composer friends and I'm not, I mean that's definitely something where you can learn about the world through that medium. However, with VFX, you know, as much as there is the subjective aspect to it, which is fun, and the very, very, very far end of the artist aspect, you know, you actually have to kind of learn what the objective things are about the world. So learning how light bounces, how you know what
bodies move and
bodies move. You're talking about animation,
right.
You know, just people watching as a animator. It's okay, that person's gait is a little bit more open than another person's walk, you know?
Absolutely. Or how the face moves and the muscle structure and skin sliding.
Yeah, right. Okay, so that's good because that's actually what you're going on is a great way to really get very broad very quickly. It's just trying to get things you know, muscle dynamics to work. You start to actually learn quite a bit about one of the things I talk about a lot with other animators and other people who are doing rigs and retargeting is I get really annoyed when I see bad elbows on rigs or bad elbows on animation. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Basically, it's either you know, just bad weight deforming. But what I'm really getting at is when people animate elbows like ball joints. Because they're hinges, they're not ball joints.
Right.
And a lot of mocap tools, I'm not going to name any, but when they retarget, actually, I'm not going to name any, but you're in my
You've already taken a dig at just let it rip.
Yeah, you're in my laser sight. So if you are retargeting directly to the forearm when you should be retargeting to the shoulder ball socket, that's going to be a much better looking arm movement because otherwise you're going to end up with Commander Shepard's forearms in Mass Effect.
Oh, wow,
where they kind of bend at the wrong angle.
That's a great example.
I've seen that. I love those games, but I'm these elbows look whack sometimes. You know?
Absolutely.
It looks like his elbows are breaking mid animations, and that's because when the mocap files, say you're using Rococo, and this is not a dig at Rococo. This is just with a lot of mocap files. The mocap files, they'll when you're rotating your arm L, say you have your arm set an L for people who can't see,
right?
And you rotate it to the side, you have your elbow bent at 90 degree angles. If you rotate your forearm out, that's not your forearm doing it, that's your shoulder. But the mocap data doesn't see that. It moves just the forearm. And so when you transfer that to a rig, it looks like hot garbage.
You can say whatever.
Okay.
Wow, yeah, you're right. Oh, that's so interesting.
And I mean, I guess I can give a plug just because I love this add-on so much. But one of the things I love about the AutoRig Pro add-on is you can retarget directly to IK, and that will actually keep the elbow working as a hinge.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. If you retarget to FK with the add-on, it doesn't necessarily work. But he actually has a cleanup option when you're retargeting. So if you want to retarget directly to FK, because I think it's more accurate to what the silhouette of the mocap is doing.
Right.
So that's why it's good to retarget to FK, because with IK it's sort of like an interpolated version of the mocap.
Sure.
But he actually has a way of processing the FK where it actually corrects the elbows. So that's why I love that add-on, because it has, I think, the easiest and most procedural consumer retargeter out there.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, that's a great plug. Do you use a ton of add-ons with Blender?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So this talk, I was representing Barnstorm, but I could probably talk for hours about utilizing add-ons.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I think I have 4 or 5 pages on the Blender orders.
Oh my goodness.
So I have probably over 100.
That's incredible. And you use them fairly regularly, or at one time or another they've helped?
Pretty regularly, honestly.
Wow.
Like, I haven't bought the clean panels add-on. Or no, I bought it. I just haven't bothered to learn it yet. So I really have to, when I'm using Blender, it's a nightmare. I have to scroll through the end panel.
Oh, right.
So many freaking add-ons and stuff.
Oh, I'll bet that's a hassle sometimes.
Yeah, I just gotta see if I like the clean panels add-on or not. But that's, I bought it and I just haven't used it yet. Like, what's one that I really like that I really think the RBD Lab one is pretty awesome. And I just haven't really got a chance to dive into that one. But it's like one of the best, I think, ways to do like effects in Blender. It has, one of the really cool things about it is it has the ability to do bent metal. And so I'm not talking about like soft body simulations where the plasticity is like turned up a ton and the stiffness is turned up a ton.
Okay.
Because that can kind of get you it. You can't really do like a soft body like that with like a helicopter. I mean, you can, but it's more of a hack. So with like, it's actually in my talk. I'm not sure if you, you missed that part.
I missed it because I was right after you, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I actually, in one of the previous sequences that I had done, I had this big train crash sequence, and I was actually following Albert Relay tutorial from like a few years ago. He did the big plane crash tutorial.
Love Albin stuff.
Yeah, he's awesome. He does like these cool like Napoleon renders and the space shuttle model.
A wide range of skill sets, I feel like.
Freaking loves modeling space suits. My God, he's got like 100. And he had this, I think it was a car crash tutorial, and it was cool. He used soft body to deform the car on a rigid body sim, but that workflow is kind of limited, and it's kind of a hack. But I used it in that previs.
Oh, wow.
So when the train's tumbling, it actually was sort of deforming a little bit in a cheat way.
That's awesome.
And I was much better at that workflow like 5 years ago when that was like the only thing that I had at my arsenal at the time. But what's cool about RBD Lab is that it kind of has this pretty streamlined tool set. I used it once and I was like, oh, that's pretty easy. I tried using it the other day and I couldn't figure it out. So I'm sure if you just kind of get used to it, it actually is pretty easy. But what it allows for you to do is, so for like, I've seen this exact tutorial done by Stephen Nipping for Houdini. Stephen Nipping's a super mega powered effects Houdini teacher. Yeah, crazy. He did the 2 Star Destroyers crashing in Rogue One.
Oh, did he really?
Yeah, he's a badass.
Whoa!
Or at least he supervised it. Yeah. So, actually, no, it's on his reel. So I think he did do it. And when you're doing stuff like crashing vehicles, you still fracture it like a rigid body sim. But then what you do is you take all the components that you would want to be like a singular piece of metal that's bending, and you do essentially a point deform. You duplicate the part of the rigid body fracture that you want to be the piece metal, and then you point deform or surface deform in Blender to those fractures. And those fractures, they have not fixed constraints, they have soft body constraints, so they don't pull apart totally. So as they stretch and move around and warp, if you didn't have the duplicate that was point deformed to it, you would see just like a thing with a bunch of cracked edges moving around like eggshell. But what you want is actually something that is a continuous mesh that is bending and breaking at certain constraint
that
points.
Makes sense. Right.
And that add-on, it does it. You can probably get that going on like a simple asset in like 20 minutes.
Really?
And that is a monumental thing to get to in Houdini.
Whoa.
Like that, I really like his tutorials, and doing that one was like a struggle. So that's an add-on that I really want to get to. But
that's incredible. I didn't even know about that add-on, to be honest with you.
Yeah, another add-on I really want to get into, but I just have there's no real reason for me yet to use is the RBC add-on, which is he made an auto car rigger that you can drive. And it's all dynamic, and he has it set up so you can rig like semis and
goodness,
and like 6-wheeled cars and stuff like that.
That's incredible.
And you can drive with an Xbox controller. You can crash into to different takes that you did. Yeah, that's cool.
So when you talk about add-ons, like it makes sense for what you do to always have fingers on the pulse of like what new add-ons are coming out. And I'm kind of the opposite, where I used add-ons like early in my education, and then they stop being supported, and then it creates a huge problem for like people watching the tutorial later.
Oh, sure.
So I've trained myself to like never do add-ons, and so I'm kind of out of the loop, and I'm like, wow, it's such a thriving ecosystem of people developing crazy tools.
Yeah, Blender is pretty intuitive to get into a lot of things, and it's funny that you bring that up. So like, for instance, when there's a lot of I think criticism of Blender, sometimes what I've heard certain people say is, you can use Blender, but you have to buy a few dozen add-ons just to make it usable. And, this is sometimes coming from Autodesk people. I'm like, okay, have you tried using Maya out of the box? You need pipeline. You need tools. Like, it is, you could probably do everything by yourself, but technically you can do everything by yourself in Blender as well.
Right.
It just takes longer.
Right,
like, people use add-ons. People use plugins in Maya. It's the whole, in fact, like, without Ziva now, I'm like sort of suspicious, like why I haven't used Maya anymore, because that was probably the best thing I had going was the fact that Ziva, that tissue and muscle system, was a big attractor to Maya. And then Unity bought it and screwed it over or made it proprietary. So now people are like, well, what do we do about creatures?
Right. Oh, wow. Okay. Would you be willing to give a summary of like your career and like where Blender fits in?
Sure. So I went over some of this in the talk, but
gotcha.
I was going pretty quickly through it because there's a lot of more funnier twists and turns. So I've been in VFX for 9 years technically, but I'm sort of a filmmaker at heart in every single regard that you can think. Like I love editing and I love cameras.
Right.
I have comedian friends. I like doing, acting and bits with them. We like writing stuff. So, all this like high end above the line duties like acting and directing and writing. I mean, that was sort of like, that's more of something you can most people like aspire to. On the other end, I was trying to get into film and television industry through like videography and editing and camera work. And so actually my first job was I was working at a local news station as a cam operator. And so I've been in the TV industry for 13 years, actually.
Whoa, okay. You spent 4 years in TV.
Well, I spent 2 years working at a news station. And then once I moved to LA, I lived and made my living as an extra for 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Trying to, make films with my friends and find, what job, what avenue was I going to get down here in LA. Right. And, so backtracking a little bit, because I'm kind of jumping around everywhere. So like halfway into work at the news station, this would be like 2011, I was actually visiting my friend Anthony Novak in, I think, Sacramento, like somewhere around that area. And we were going to go skateboarding at some of the local parks in that city.
Okay.
So, we were skateboarders. We like to edit a lot of videos and film ourselves doing stupid shit. And so, but I was always keenly interested in CG. Well, maybe I should go really far back.
Yeah, what were some inspirations?
So, when I was like 6 or 7, I think I knew how blue screen worked because I was watching the making of the original Star Wars on VHS. Yeah. So, we had 4 VHSs. We had the original trilogy, and we had the 4th one, which was the making of A New Hope. And it had C-3PO and R2-D2, and they were the host of it.
Oh, wow.
And it went through, effects, sound effects, casting, and coming up with everything. So I was always, like, pretty fascinated by CG. So once I got into skateboarding, that's when my editing sort of obsession came out.
Sure.
And then, so on this fateful Saturday when I was skating with my friend, I was talking to his cousin, and he mentioned this 3D program that he had used to. He said I think he had tried to design an Iron Man suit or something like that.
Wow!
And I was like, oh, what is it? And he's it had a weird name, it was Blender or something.
Wow!
And if you remember, like still in the early 2010s, like Windows got viruses pretty frequently still. Like it was still kind of a nightmare back then, Right. And so I didn't want to download this program from the internet. It's obscure 3D program I've never heard of. So I actually asked him to give me his on a thumb drive. And so the first time I got Blender was the sort of super old school way of I got 2.49B on a flash drive.
2.49B in the early 2010s.
Which is funny because other ones were already out.
Right. Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was dicking around with this thing like, this is awesome, but this is hard to use.
Before 2.5 was, yeah.
Dude, yeah. And so me and my little brother, because I sort of pulled him in one weekend when I was visiting my folks. And we were trying to learn how to use 2.49b. And we were like, okay, well, let's figure out how to put a keyframe down. I had no idea what a graph editor. So I just did everything on the timeline. I didn't know how to bring up a graph editor.
Oh, sure.
And so to make a linear key, I would just put two keys next to each other.
Yeah,
that was the most I knew how to do. Remember, it was the lines, right? Cause it was
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
And so we made a sphere going down a row of boxes, tall boxes. So buildings.
Sure.
I was trying to make a city block, right? And we rendered that. I think the next thing we tried doing was we made like a little like gyro sphere thing, a la Contact, right?
Right. Okay.
Or Mass Effect 2 as well.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you using to learn Blender at this stage? Anything?
I can't remember. So I came across Blender Guru and I was like, oh, there's a different version of Blender.
Yes,
that looks amazing. Yeah. so he sort of turned me on to just downloading the latest version. I was like, once I got going on that, I was flying. It was awesome.
Right.
I think it was 2.56 or maybe it was 2.6. I can't remember which one I downloaded.
Okay.
But it was definitely after the interface upgrade.
Yeah. Okay.
And then it felt like a program. It was pretty cool.
Right. And you had no other experience with like 3ds Max or Softimage or anything.
Yeah, actually, we might have been talking about this yesterday, but no, up until that point, I literally heard about Blender through a person, who I
physical person.
A physical person.
That's crazy that happened to me.
And only around that time, once I actually knew what Blender was, I think I had finally like a reference frame to maybe Google what other ones could be. Yeah. And then I heard about Lightwave, and I was like, oh, I gotta get Lightwave next.
Yeah.
Lightwave was on its way out.
That's true. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But to me, I was like, oh, I got what's this Lightwave? I hadn't heard about my. Maybe the first one I heard about after Blender was maybe after Lightwave was 3ds Max, maybe.
Okay. Did Lightwave become Moto?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so. I think Moto was before that.
Gotcha.
So I think I knew about After Effects at that point. So I knew about VFX consumer level stuff that was out there.
Okay.
But I was very much more interested in the 3D stuff.
Okay.
Just because I was like, okay, you can make spaceships with 3D applications. You can't really make spaceships with After Effects.
Right.
Or what I was interested in doing was not the kind of 2D stuff.
So. Absolutely. Wow. And so how did you break into the industry, I guess having Blender in your history? The real question I want to ask is like a lot of people speculate on to get into the industry, like make sure you know Maya tools or whatever. So how did you approach that?
So I have a bunch of fun answers for that. Okay. So I was going to Chico State, so I was getting schooling, though it was in a different degree.
Okay.
I was getting a communication design degree, which was a very, all-consuming degree. It covers a lot of things.
Sure.
What sucked is most people in my major, they took it because it was supposedly like one of the easier majors. Gotcha. So I was kind of sick of everyone by the end. Oh man, a bunch of tryhards. So I was like my couple of last years in college. That's when I was working and at that news station. I learned Blender. I had been learning Blender for 6 months. Oh yeah, around 6 months, I was starting to make some spaceship animations.
There you go.
Getting into the Blender internal engine and messing around with that.
R.I.P.
Yeah. And then my buddy, who was also in my major, the communication major, he signed up for the 3D modeling class. I was like, what are you talking about? We have a 3D modeling class here?
Right.
Turns out that class, it was a small crossover that we could get credits for in our degree, but it was a class, a part of this whole freaking department that I didn't know about. This whole C department.
Unbelievable.
And we were one of the 4 CSUs, so state universities in California, that had applied computer graphics program. And I had no idea. I'd been there for 4 years.
I think it's hysterical that you're at the college and didn't know about the degree program, but your cousin or your friend's cousin tells you about Blender physically. That is nuts.
On a skateboarding
On a skateboard. Wow.
So funny. And so easily signed up for that. And you can probably guess that was Maya, right?
Oh, sure.
So I'm learning Maya. And so it was the first 3D modeling class. Now, I don't want to be too mean to the students in that class. I mean, I was older because this was like their main degree that they were going for.
Okay.
But I was also like not in their major, but I was I was way past everybody.
Right,
Because I was using Blender. And I was also very frustrated. And so I remember one time we were supposed to we were supposed to make a death scene, right?
Right.
And the death scene, we were supposed to UV, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm not doing that because I had just been a lazy bum and like box wrapping everything.
Oh, sure.
Because that was so easy to do in Blender.
Right.
You know, it's bad. You should do some UV wrapping every now and then.
Yeah,
It's a good thing to know how to frickin' do, guys. I'm not saying just use that, anyone who's listening. But, you know, it's very easy to do. I actually, do you know, is box triplanar or is it a different way of going about it? I've never been able to really understand if it's triplanar. Because you hear triplanar is heavy.
Yeah.
But box has always felt pretty light. So I always wonder if Blender had a way that it did it differently.
Man, I have not box unwrapped something since probably college.
Sure. Okay. So, well, no, it wouldn't be a box unwrap, but it was like a, you know, the box
Projection?
Yeah, projection.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if it's triplanar.
I do not know.
It probably is. Anyways, we can go past that. So I would just do stuff that I had learned in Blender in my Maya projects.
Right.
And I remember, I mean, this is sort of a bad habit of mine, as you probably know from talking to me yesterday. But so that desk thing, I didn't start until the night before.
Oh, there you go.
And everyone had been working on it for weeks, and I did it in a night just because I had, Blender knowledge.
Right.
And it was actually the Deseret table on the Millennium Falcon, the chess table.
Oh my goodness!
And it was a pretty big hit with everybody in the class.
Was it? Would you say like kind of a standout in the class?
I don't know if my first projects were, but our final presentation, I think we won like an award in the whole department.
Whoa!
And that was a group project that me, one friend, and then we were kind of loners.
Okay.
And at the very end, we were walking around. The teacher said, "Okay, go find a group." And you know how, especially like VFX artists are trying to go walk around, like, make friends with everybody.
Right.
And the last two people who were alone, we were like, "Okay, well, let's grab these guys."
Yeah.
And that ended up being this guy Curtis and this other guy Chris Beatty.
Okay.
Ended up being one of my great friends who I met in college, and one of the few guys I know is actually down here working and doing incredibly well.
Wow.
And Chris Beatty's actually the guy, or I'll get to this because that wasn't my talk. So anyways, we'll come back to Chris Beatty.
Okay.
So in that group project, we were standout, yeah.
Wow.
We got knocked 1 point. We would have got a perfect point, but my dumbass, I was in charge of rendering.
Yeah.
So actually, this is the funny thing. This is another stupid habit of mine. Making it seem like I did a lot, but really being the laziest person in the room and knowing one button that other people don't know.
Okay.
So no one knew how to do soft lighting. We had to do like it had to be a scene. It was an environment assignment.
Okay.
And it had to tell a story. So we did like a 1950s diner with a like a white, line, or what do you call it? Like the human crime scene. Like
like a chalk line.
Chalk line of like, and it had knocked over like gumball machine.
Gotcha.
And, 50s.
Crime scene kind of context.
Yeah. A jukebox in the back, and it was a cool little scene. And everyone else's scenes, they put in work. They even wrapped their stuff. They modeled, I think some people did like a Gothic church or something like that. Okay. And but everyone had hard shadows. No one knew how to do soft shadows, since I was the only one who knew how to do soft shadows. And I also was the only one who knew how to hack some GI because I've been doing my own Blender renders. And so the night before that was due, I had modeled, I think, a cash register for our site. Everyone else had modeled the tables, the silverware, the seats, the background, the jukebox. I had modeled a cash register. It was really shitty, too. And so everyone else was away, and me and one other person, we were staying up late, assembling it. That was kind of our job.
Yeah.
And she had walked away, and I was just sort of messing around with it. And when everyone came back, and when the other group members came in the morning, like, "Chris, what the did you do?" And I had just done simple things in Mental Ray. Mental Ray?
Oh, you were using Mental Ray, not Maya software, I guess.
Yeah. And that's how. So it's kind of funny, like Blender's sort of informing me how to hack Maya.
Absolutely.
Against all the other students.
That's really I have a commercial software first background, so I always see Blender as like catching up I guess, in a way.
Sure,
but
sure.
Is it kind of the other way around for you?
Well, I mean, just in that class.
Just in that
class. So, because we were learning, what was it? What's that? Mudbox. And I was actually pretty impressed by Mudbox. I thought Mudbox was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think, I had been sculpting in Blender, but there were things about Mudbox I think that were just more straightforward. Like we learned how to do, like baking down normal maps and using that on like a creature or a character that we had designed, which was super cool. So your question though was like, okay, well, formal training or anything like that. And
so you did have some Maya training.
So I did have some Maya training. I don't want to discredit that. Yeah. However, I think that's a little bit to the side because when I used Maya later on, I actually pretty much had to relearn Maya again. So,
okay.
So I actually minored in applied computer graphics. So I stayed another year and minored in it because it just sounded like a fun thing to do. And then as far as like getting into the industry, which I think is a fun topic to talk about.
Right.
I mean, it's a little bit different now because we're all remote, but back then I drove down in my skateboarding Astro van that used to take trips everywhere and lived out of that for a few months working as an extra.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah. And so I just came to LA and was trying to find any kind of work out here. So I didn't live in my van for 2 years, but I did extra work for 2 years.
Wow. Anything we might have seen you in?
I was in the Ted movie.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the background somewhere?
Yeah. I think Ted 2.
Okay.
I was like a Jedi Knight at a Comic-Con scene.
Nice.
I was in, every show you can think of. Okay. So like they wanted adults to play younger. And at that time I was in my early 20s, so I looked like, a baby. So, so I was in like a lot of scenes in like Pretty Little Liars where I was in the back as a
high school
student or something or, whatever.
Yeah.
And then, like all kinds of stuff, like crime procedurals. I was a dead body in one NCIS movie. Like I was the crime scene victim.
Yeah.
Like, just had to lay there in the back of a car looking dead and decrepit. So it was kind of funny.
Can you think of one I'm sure all of us think about being an extra, because that's maybe the most tangible thing, the normal person can get. But like, what is a particularly unglamorous reality of the extra process?
Not knowing, I think we're gonna be every day.
Oh, sure.
And when you get booked, you have to go.
Whoa.
And it's sort of fair because, it's a huge mountain pushing effort to get a film crew somewhere someday.
Yeah.
And the way the casting works basically is, you sign up for these services that will phone you in to different productions to put you in there. And then if you get picked like a couple days before, they're relying on you to be there. You're like the last thing they care about.
Yeah, for you to mess up their production, it's like
It's like, and so you basically sign up for this job. And honestly, it's not that bad because if you want to take days off, you just let them know. But once you're cast, you got to go because they need to, depend on you.
Yeah.
And, it sounds a little bit maybe one side, but if you actually think about it, if there's some production that casts like 3 extras for like a bar scene and they want to like maybe reuse you in different shots, if you don't show up, they're and they may have rented that like a $20,000 place. Well, if one extra decides like, I'm going to call in sick, you're screwed.
Yeah.
The whole production's screwed. The only other really unglamorous part, because it's actually a lot of fun, because it's kind of like camp every day. Like you meet different people, you become best friends and forget them like the next day, because you're just meeting so many people. Every now and then, like if you looked like a certain type, like if you got cast on the high school shows, or if you were like a recurring, like my friend Avery I was telling you. He's actually a lab technician in the back of Bones for like several seasons.
Oh wow!
So you can actually see him walking back there, his tall, linky, blonde ass.
Right. Okay. I'll keep an eye out. That's awesome.
And what's cool about those kind of times, you actually have your little extra friend groups that you would make over the time. And the only really unglamorous thing is sometimes you get treated like cattle. Like even though I was sort of defending that production, sometimes they don't give a shit.
It kind of makes sense. Yeah. Okay, sorry, I was a fun little rabbit trail about that. But so then, where was your first job? Was it Barnstorm?
No. Okay, so just about to get to this. So I was still working as an extra. By this point, I had joined SAG, which meant I got to work on a lot of much cooler SAG jobs. One of the cooler sort of quasi. It wasn't really an extra. It was pretty much being an extra, but it was much more of a crew job, which was being a stand-in.
Okay.
So when I was SAG, I got to be a stand-in in a couple of movies, and that was fun because you actually have duty, and the crew knows you, so they don't treat you like crap. And as long as you're aware and mindful, not trying to sneak lines or being a ham, the directors and the director of photography, they'll actually like you and converse with you, which is kind of cool. And so I was definitely getting old at that point, and
old for an extra.
Oh no, I wasn't. No, that job was getting old for me.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
No. There was tons of. Actually, the older people worked a lot more because there was less of them. There was a lot more burnout for the younger people. And there was one fateful day. I was kind of having a shitty day, but I didn't want to like ruin it. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go to the Brickyard in North Hollywood and just have like a fun night. Okay. And so I was trying to like rectify having like a weird day.
Yeah.
And I saw these two people there that I had met, these two girls that I met like a couple weeks back when my friend who was like super depressed, he was like, Chris, you gotta help me. Like, gotta be my wingman.
Yeah, okay.
Because he said, he was like, I was on an 8-month dry spell, man.
Gotcha.
Go out. I think I did help him, if I recall correctly. But when I was there, these two girls we had met that night, they were there. I was like, I'll go talk to him again. Yeah. And they were, nice enough.
Okay.
Or one of them was nice enough. The other one, I don't know what was the deal with her. She was very, insecure, but she was pretty mean, and she was like judging everyone in the bar. And I was just talking to them because this first person I recognized in the bar, and the other one, she looked at these two people sitting. If you've ever been to the Brickyard in North Hollywood, it's got some benches. It's very dark lit. There's benches surrounding the bar, and there were these two people. They were sitting across from each other. They were on their phone. They weren't talking to anyone. And she started like kind of make fun of them. Okay. Not to them, but just like talking shit about them. Yeah. And I saw the opportunity, and I went right up to them, sat down next to the guy. It was a girl and a guy, and pulled up my phone and just started fake texting to no one. I actually wanted to like kind of prove against her point, like, I bet I can become friends with these people. But I was sort of like teasing him, and we got to talking, and all of a sudden I was like, well, what do you do? And he said, well, I'm a VFX supervisor at Stoopid Buddy Stoodios. And I was like, oh shit. Oh my God.
That's the right person to sit down beside.
I've met one.
Yeah.
And I had been doing a bunch of, like I said, I've been doing spaceship projects ever since college. And so I had this big sci-fi short film that I've been working on. And I actually had it as like an unlisted YouTube link because I didn't have a Dropbox at the time. Okay. And so I actually had something to show him on my phone. And he was actually looking to hire that month, or I think the next month, when they were going to ramp up the crew. And he was basically telling me like, oh yeah, this is way better than what we've been looking at. I was like, oh, great. Okay.
What? Wow.
Yeah. And so walked away from that.
Hired basically, or having an opportunity.
Having an interview.
Yeah.
And that was Jack Hamilton, by the way. Okay. He was the VFX soup at Stoopid Buddy during that time.
Gotcha.
And a month later, got hired on May the 4th.
Wow.
Yeah.
First. It's ridiculous that you've had like physical interactions because the advice we give is like it's all digital. Email this link or email a demo reel or whatever. But you're physically finding Blender, meeting your first employer basically. That's nuts. So then in being a Blender user in Hollywood animation or VFX houses, does that give you a certain standing with your coworkers?
Maybe. So like when Stoopid Buddy Stoodios, if people don't know what that is, they do Robot Chicken. So they do stop motion. And so I got a job basically as a comp artist. Okay. But he still liked my 3D work. I think he was actually pretty interested like how I was doing it. And so I actually brought Blender to Stoopid Buddy, and they still use it there.
No way.
I was the first person to really get that up and going.
Wow.
at Stoopid Buddy.
Right.
And I take massive pride in that.
That's pretty incredible.
And Jack also started to really get into it. He was really interested in it too. And he really allowed me to do stuff and try stuff out.
Yeah, okay.
Which I always feel kind of bad about because it was my first job, so I got a little bit of ego, and we kind of butted heads a little bit. Okay. And we were still kind of good at the end, but I kind of was like too much of the, pupil who needed to shut the fuck up.
Yeah, okay. I've had moments like that, definitely. Yeah. Firm memories. Mm-hmm.
And I think luckily I really did learn it at Stoopid Buddy, and I hadn't really had that problem other places. I don't think too much. So,
okay.
So it was pretty constrained at some point. But at Stoopid Buddy, there was a digital art department at Stoopid Buddy, but it wasn't for actually doing shot work. It was for doing digital sculpts. And printing, and that was headed by, oh my God, Kay. Yeah, I always forget her last name. And there was this other guy there, Victor, who I'd actually worked with at a different company. And so they were doing CG there.
What's Victor's last name? It's not Fernandez by chance, is it?
No.
Okay, I knew a Victor Fernandez who moved out here.
Victor Latour, my God.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, Victor Latour. And so, they were kind of Maya and ZBrush based.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, there was a little bit of pushback sometimes even at a stop motion company, which had nothing to do with like the traditional 3D pipeline. There was some kickback even then for certain things that I wanted to do in Blender. And it just became the eventuality though, because they were mostly ZBrush based, when a job came up that needed a 3D character for a stop motion, because it was like this big like Megatron looking, or what's the Galactica? It was this big Galactica parody they were doing for some other show. It wasn't for Robot Chicken, but it was for a show like Robot Chicken. Okay. It had to be CG, and so I was like, okay, well, it needs to talk because it's a very talk heavy,
in a stop motion.
Yeah. And Kay actually learned how to rig for Blender to make the phoneme shapes for Blender, basically going by my guidance. This is how I think the rest of us should animate it. And so I was basically the facilitator of how we would work with it, how we would render it, and then me and a couple of comp artists, we weren't the animators at the company. The animators, by the way, at Robot Chicken, they were like actors there. They were like the special people that everyone loved, because they were like the hot shit. Like if the the bit with I don't know, Superman and Batman didn't come across funny, like that was the core of everything. Was that playfulness?
Absolutely.
Emperor Palpatine shaking his hands like that, a lightsaber.
Yes. Oh my goodness, classic scenes.
Right. So there was other comp artists there who had also kind of gotten in the industry as comp artists, but who wanted to be 3D artists. Okay. So there's a guy, Hunter Welker. I think he was a little bit younger than me. He joined like a month or two after, and I sort of recruited him, and we 3D animated that Galactica parody character. Using Kay's facial rig.
Whoa.
I think I had rigged the hands, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And did you render it in Blender too?
Yeah, render it in Blender.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cycles, I imagine, probably?
No, I think that was internal. I don't think Cycles was ready.
That was still internal.
Yeah, so very soon after that, we started to do Cycles.
Okay.
I think we had just gotten like better GPUs, and we could finally do stuff like that.
Is this like 2012-ish?
It'd be 2015.
2015. Yeah. I didn't know internal was still in the trunk. Were you using an old version of Blender?
No, we were using like 2.6 or something at that point.
Just remembering when that was removed. Wow.
And maybe we were using Cycles. I can't remember. I definitely used internal for some of my early stuff, but we did start using Cycles at one point, and
maybe when denoising was introduced?
This is still way before denoising. So that's actually a good reason probably why we weren't using it, because we had to wait still for it to resolve.
Yes.
And because it was a stop motion studio, there is no noise, right?
Right.
For the most part. And so whenever I would try to present something that had any noise, they're like, get the out of here. Actually,
that makes a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was at Robot Chicken, Stoopid Buddy for 2 years.
Okay.
And then work got dry at some point. Okay. And if you remember, I was being a little bit lippy. And, people got laid off and furloughed all the time at Robot Chicken, because we just had seasons pretty much of when people would work. And I think it was like about that time when I was laid off. What's funny though, 2 days before I was notified that I was getting laid off, my friend Chris Beatty, who I had met, in that Maya modeling class.
Yeah, okay.
I had heard he had moved to LA. We had been talking a little bit every now and then. He was really struggling to get work at first. Okay. And then the next time I heard from him was 2 days before I got laid off. And he basically called me up. He's like, hey, Chris, I'm working at this cool company. It's called The Third Floor, and we're working on a pretty cool project. And he's like, hey, I wonder if you'd ever want to come and join us. And I was like, I don't know. I had never quit a company. I'd never been laid off from a company. So I was pretty freaking comfortable being fine. I had an apartment finally.
Third floor. Wow.
But so the moment I heard I was getting axed, I was like, shit.
Perfect timing.
I called up Chris. I was like, hey, bud. I'm
willing to consider.
I'm willing to consider. And so, It actually took a few months. It was like 3 months of actually waiting and sort of negotiating, trying to make sure. Because I did want to kind of level up finally. So I wasn't going into it desperate. And I think I had unemployment for the first time ever too. Or maybe not. Oh, I know. I went back to extra work for a couple of months.
Gotcha.
That's what I did.
Okay.
That's how I was able to afford. Yeah, that was freaking crazy. So went from Robot Chicken, the show that I'd grown up watching, this wild, wacky, people know the name. It's very known. My boss was Seth Green. I met him a couple.
Oh my goodness, that's wild. Yeah.
And then being not hired, which was a fun ego hit. Then maybe getting a job, maybe not getting a job at this third floor company.
Had you heard of Third Floor before?
No.
Okay.
I knew of Previs from watching the prequel documentaries, the Star Wars prequel documentary. So I knew what Previs was. And finally, I've been contacted by HR from Third Floor to maybe, start the onboarding process or whatever. And then I'm there. And it's like in June I was finally there.
Okay.
The idea was I'd be coming for a certain amount of money that was much more than Robot Chicken, which was a huge win. So I was already excited, but I was also wondering, okay, so if this is a level up, am I going to be able to survive?
Yeah.
And I knew it was Maya as well.
Okay.
And I was like, shit, I haven't used Maya in a while. So I did a crash course trying to learn everything I could learn about Maya in a week.
Yeah.
I spent almost all of it on freaking modeling and rendering, which was not what I was going to be doing at all there, which was a terrible mistake. Yeah, so my first day, it's on the 6th floor. Funny, because it's called the 3rd floor. It's on the 6th floor of this cool building near LACMA and what's the oil tar pits.
Gotcha.
The tar pits. And there's like a super nice kitchen. There's this big lobby. And I'm like, shit, what am I getting myself into?
Yes.
And it was going to be like a training day for 6 new hires.
Oh, wow.
So I find the other 5 hires. I'm the 6th one. I walk in. I'm kind of trying to figure out how I stand against these people. And they're talking about Maya. And I am way inexperienced compared to these people. And so we go through the training that day. And 4 of us were going to be hired as previs. 2 of us were going to be hired as post-viz. That's what we knew at the beginning. Okay. But I didn't know which one of us was getting that thing. They didn't really say that at first. And so we're getting walked through the program. I can't remember her name, but she was sort of like watching and looking at us. Okay. I didn't really change that much. I think she was just trying to see if we just get this person out of the room.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Sort of meeting okay, so and trying to gather who we are in that room. And man, oh man, I was like, where's the camera?
Whoa, sounds intense.
All of a sudden, towards the end of the day, and I'm kind of getting through it, but it's funny because I do look a little bit green. And there was this big room at the back. It was kind of actually near the training room, but there was this big room at the back that went to a huge wing of 3rd floor that was the locked off area, or the super NDA area. I was like, I wonder what's behind there. And I'm thinking, okay, well, I'm probably going to be put on some of the littler projects. And so finally, I think one of the leads for the job I didn't know I was about to have, he came into the training room and was like, okay, we need the post-viz artist. And he picked out me and this other girl, Alejandra, and we were pulled in to the secret lock doors. And I was like, oh, all these kids who thought they were better than me, they're going to get the shit jobs. And so we walk in, and turns out I'm like, oh, that's Tony Stark. Oh, that's Captain America. Oh, shit, I'm working on Infinity War.
What? That's how you found out?
Yeah. And so my first previs job was the highest previs movie ever made.
Oh, my goodness. That's insane.
And this is a guy who doesn't know how to use Maya. And so I basically spent the first 2 weeks, trying my hardest to not get fired.
Oh, wow. Just to not be noticed as
Because I was asking so many questions. And they had an order of operations to doing things. And if you kind of did your own thing, it wasn't good, because the really smart thing about how 3rd Floor was doing their previs is everyone could kind of pick up a shot that someone else had done. There was a procedure.
Sure.
And so you could kind of do some stuff. Once you were a higher up and you knew okay, this is the only way we're going to get this done. Yeah. And this shot's a difficult level that I'm not even going to give this to some of the medium artists. I'm only going to give this to other leads, and they see that I'm doing something weird. They'll be able to figure it out. Yeah. But for the most part, you had to do a lot of like a glow, we actually had like little glow cards in Maya because we didn't want to do glow sometimes in the post-viz After Effects side of things, because what if someone didn't know how to do that? What if it looked a little bit differently? So we had like sort of restrictions. And so I'm asking all these kind of questions, trying not to get fired. And Patrick Haskew, who I love, he was my first post-viz supervisor. He really didn't like me at first because he could tell I was, just some asshole who had somehow weasel a little way into his job. And he kept like being critical of some of the stuff I was doing, like really critical. But the problem was, actually, that wasn't necessarily my fault. Another lead had been doing a part of this one sequence in their own way. And this was like one of those things that even the lead shouldn't have been doing in his own way.
Oh, okay.
And so I had to like basically cross-reference and be a detective just to keep myself from getting fired. And like, no, like, and this shot's like this, and this shot's like this. And at some point he realized I knew the process so detailed. He was like, oh, I can trust him because I had done enough work to preserve my own space at the company. Right. And then after that, I started to pick up enough, and then it became learning at like an ease because it was I had got enough that you're still valuable to be on the team. Yeah. But now, at that point, I felt I'm allowed to learn. Allowed to progress.
Okay. It sounds like you're a pretty fast learner.
Maybe. So I feel like there's Einstein's a really smart guy.
True.
Stephen Hawking's a really smart guy. I feel like if there's any way I can try to be smart, it's to brute force it. Yeah. Kind of like Einstein, he tries to brute force stuff, whereas Hawking, I feel like he just imagines stuff.
Okay, I see what you mean.
My whole philosophy is just to fail as fast as I can and just learn that way. I had just failed so much at trying stuff in Blender or in After Effects, making my short films, just like brute force doing things in really dumb ways for years and years and years. So when I got to Maya, I don't think it was necessarily that I was a really fast learner. It's just like, maybe in some sense I was a fast learner, but it wasn't because of any, I think, predisposition to it.
I see what you mean.
I just was like, I knew how to brute force my way. Oh, okay, so I had this teacher. Actually, this is actually a really interesting thing that I think would be really valuable for anyone to listen to. Yeah. And I always forget to bring this up. I think it's super powerful. Yeah. So when I was in college, I think two teachers had a really big effect on me. One was my editing teacher, Kara. Okay. She taught me a bunch of stuff that broke my mind out of some, I don't want to say ego, but I guess some narrow views I had about filmmaking and editing. But really the best teacher I ever had, not a 3D teacher, not an editing teacher, not a design or film teacher, but it was a marketing teacher, this guy Byron Wolf. And I also took one of his photography classes, which was a super fun class too. Yeah. But in both of his classes, he had this way of going about things that, man, oh man, once I learned it, it never left me. Okay. And it was funny, I was very, very, very skeptical. I thought he was, just some, I don't know, try hard, had some, flowy thing that sounded nice. But basically, what he taught me how to do was to innovate. Okay. He literally taught me how to innovate, how to think and innovate and to try different things. Because I feel like so often people can get into this mindset where there is only 2 or 3 or 4 ways to approach a project. Yes. And the truth is, if you really think about it, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of ways to get through a problem. And I think he basically taught us how to boost our muscle of how to think about different ways to approach something. Man, I'm struggling to get to like the core of what he would kind of teach, but I think what he was trying to do, in his photography class, he had an example. He was trying to visualize, what is it called? Monument Valley in Utah. Yeah. And he tried all these different ways of taking photos from different angles and splicing things. And really what I learned from him is to not get like so hung up on like, okay, I think you have to do it like this, and you have to do it exactly like this, and you have to kind of stay to this concept in your head. And if it's not working, then I guess it never could have worked. Instead, to just keep trying small iterations or versions of the idea that you were going for and kind of let it morph until it maybe becomes something better. And he would just again and again and again, like, okay, and I tried this, and then I tried this. And I'm not really explaining it exactly the best way I can.
I think I'm picking up what you're saying, though.
Yeah, I remember talking to someone close that I know, and they were trying to figure out, what to do with their life, and they basically had it was like a two options they had. One was like really extreme, and one was really like, I guess this is my only way out. Right. I just thought like, he was trying to figure out what to do, just like with his life, like career-wise or job-wise, and one of them I just thought, I know that's not what you're going to want to do.
Yeah.
But you feel like, well, this is the only way I know how to make money. And I had taken that class and I realized, just go read a book and point at something in the middle of a book or go watch something and just think, well, what does that person do?
Right.
Write a bunch of shit down and then write what that makes you think of down. And then before you know it, you've got like 1,000 words of different jobs you could be going to look at. Just write them all down and then maybe brute force. Well, what else do those words, when you're looking at them, make you think? And maybe I can think, well, maybe I like this one a little bit more than that one. Okay, and all of a sudden you're starting to add value to all these different words. Okay, so what of all these different jobs are you more attracted to? And sure, there's some that you could maybe be really attracted to that maybe be really unrealistic. But okay, what's your second option? What's your third option? What's your fourth option? Fifth option? Sixth option?
Yeah.
And so if you just kind of stampede through ideas, and they don't have to be good. You just have to start engaging with yourself. And once that principle finally locked in, I'm not really. He had this. The class was great. I actually emailed him after like a few years ago, talking to him about how much I loved that class. And he's like, "Yeah, even I can't explain it as well as I used to." So that was kind of funny. And so I've really just used that principle when approaching, especially like pre-viz and post-viz. Like, what do they want? What do I want? What does the client wants? Just keep asking.
Oh wow! Yeah.
A brute force of questions. Did they want it shorter, smaller, faster, brighter, darker, bluer, redder? And if you keep going, and I think one of the key things about it too is and actually this is actually where I can bring this all back around to improv.
Yeah.
What's one of the core things about improv? So in long form improv, when you're doing long form improv comedy, for people who don't know what it is, you get a suggestion. It's supposed to. That's how you're supposed to know that it's not rehearsed, right? You get a suggestion from an audience, and so you start to try to make up a scene. And the first rule is yes and. Yes and doesn't necessarily mean it's funny. That's the structure you do when you're starting improv. It just helps you put like clay on the table.
Yeah.
So yes and isn't what makes it funny. So if someone says Starbucks, like okay, we'll start a scene with Starbucks. That's the kind of a go-to.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
The person will go like, okay, well, I guess I'll walk in, order Starbucks. So, hello, I'd like to order some coffee. The other person can't deny that. That's yes and. So they just have to go with it. And they go, yeah, what would you like? Would you like cream with that?
Okay.
And the next person could go and say something else. And they would keep going until one of them says, because it's all improv, they're trying to come up on the spot.
Yeah.
One person will screw up and say something stupid. That's kind of funny. And if the audience laughs at it, all of a sudden, improvers know, that's what the sketch is about.
That's the direction.
And so it's being aware to the first thing that strikes.
Oh, wow.
And so when I'm brute forcing through pre-viz or post-viz, and like if I'm working with my supervisors or at Lawson or even the clients, sometimes you're listening to the thing that first strikes them, but a lot of time you want to be providing. So what you try to do is as you're going through it, you try to be acutely aware of the thing that clicks to you. Yeah. So you're almost like talking with yourself, giving yourself ideas. It'd be the same as if you were telling me the things that I was telling me.
Yeah.
And so the first thing that you realize, like if you were going through, if I was animating a plane, flying, and I couldn't figure out what it was, so I'm starting to talk about, if I'm trying to like come up with like, well, what's wrong with it? It'd be the same as if you were like looking at it and going, is it fast? Is it too slow? Is that wobble? Oh, the wobble. Oh, the wobble.
Yeah, okay.
So you brute force your way through, and the first thing that you come across, that's what I think, makes a great improver. That's what it makes a great artist. That makes a good learner. Is the first thing that hits. That hits, and some people don't have a lot of self-awareness, so that can be difficult to,
Sure.
But I think like being acutely aware to, and that's what also just in life. Like being a good person is someone who can be aware when they're being annoying.
Yes, right.
Like you don't just get to be as funny as you think you are. If no one likes it, right? No, you get to try to be yourself with your friends.
Sure.
But if you're in a group meeting with your supervisors or some project,
Right.
and it can be fun to be goofy and comedic, but you're a dick if you keep going on for too long.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
So like awareness of like when the moment happens, I think is also important, because you can't continually brute force, because then you would go crazy, because then you would never get anything done. So.
I really like the way you explain that, because it kind of ties in a lot with what I end up telling our students, who I think a big problem with the Blender community is like kind of putting Blender as the end, right? Like learning the skills is as far as they take it, and it's not recognizing that it's just the means to an end. And so they lack that awareness of like what's hitting and what's not, but they don't ever have anything to show for all their skills a lot of times.
Sure.
And like it does seem to make sense that that's how you can brute force and iterate in your process. And it looks to me like fast learning, but so many Blender learners are like not willing to, how did you phrase it? To find the failure as quick as possible.
Yeah.
They're not willing to do that and then iterate and find the thing that hits.
Sure.
I think that's a really, like you said, that's a powerful thing to realize.
Yeah, so like I'm super slow at actually learning, I don't know, like stuff I want to learn, like coding and regular geometry nodes. But if you just apply that principle, you actually, I guess in some ways I can be a fast learner just by being aware of my failings.
Right.
So
but I mean,
maybe I should be more favorable to myself. I guess technically that is.
Absolutely. I think that's great, man. I'm glad you went there with your experience.
Yeah, Byron, man, I remember his class. I was like, because it sounded like really like far out, like what he was talking about, and it really isn't anything all that superfluous.
Okay.
Like it's just a way of attacking a thing, and our brains are kind of funny. We get really pigeonholed thinking that this is the only pathways.
Yeah.
But if you kind of step back and realize, not to take this to mindfulness. I'm not in a spiritual way. I'm not talking about this. Just as mindfulness as like a brain technique. Like if you think there are only two ways, who said there were two ways? Like in a lot of ways, you have no responsibility to be the person you were 5 seconds ago. Like if you really think about that, if you're ever frustrated, if someone cuts you off on the freeway and you're mad at dinner, I think that's a Bill Burr joke, like that's your fault. Like if you're still mad at dinner, that's your fault. But if you can kind of step back and go, well, and I can stay frustrated. I can stay, maybe I'm with someone and someone like embarrassed me.
Yeah.
I can stay sort of huffy, or I can just realize in that moment, no, I can actually, let me just try to think about this in a different way. I'm under no obligation to be stuck in this mindset. Okay, so
wow.
If I think there's two mindsets, are there 5? Are there 10? Are there 100? So if you just tell yourself there's 100, all of a sudden you feel open to the fact that there could be 100. And so then you start figuring out, like, even if you have to do a talk and you haven't prepared as much as you thought and you think you're screwed, it's like, okay, well, hold on. What if this is where you're starting? What if this is, you're born into existence and you have this problem? Okay, well, it doesn't matter if you thought there were 2 problems. What can you figure out? What other options can you do to make this better? What are there 100 more ways that you haven't thought of to maybe fix the dilemma you're in?
Oh my God. I mean, I'm inclined to bring it back to computer graphics and how we work.
Go for it, yeah.
But it's such a presence, because I imagine another theme that comes up a lot is like how to get started in freelance or whatever. And I think that people are often scared to think of, well, I've never done this exactly before, so I don't want to take the risk and make a fool of myself something like that. Sure. But if, like you said, you see the moment as if you were just born into existence now, and I'm under no obligation, like it just frees you to accept the challenge and figure out the failure fast and find out the right way, brute force. I mean, I think that is a testament to how you've succeeded. Given your story, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, amor fati, love your fate. So if you have a problem, just accept it with brute reality.
Right. That's good stuff, man. I didn't expect to go there. But that obviously applies way outside of Blender into life in general.
Yeah, I guess that kind of brings back to what I was talking about earlier. So, like, a lot of knowledge, I think, is transferable from different disciplines, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I should get this all the way to Barnstorm at least. So, I survived third floor, and then oh yeah, there was a lull because I think that was around. It was a couple of years before I think Disney was buying Warner Brothers, and then actually a year before that happened, it was actually creating a lull in the previous work because it was what about these big superhero action movies? So a lot of that people wouldn't know it, but it was actually paused like a year before people would actually even know about it. And so I got laid off, and I was actually pretty hyped on that because I was laid off in a way where I could collect unemployment for the first time.
Nice. Yeah.
I was like, cool, I'm going to work on my projects. And I had super cheap rent at the time. I was living in a living room it was my apartment, but me and my roommate, we shared it.
Gotcha.
That way I could, spend all my money on GPUs and shit. And I'd been working at third floor, actually paid pretty decent for the first time in my life. I was buying 1080 Ti's up the wazoo.
There you go.
I was like, I'm just going to render everything. And thank God this next part happened because, man, I still didn't know that much. VFX. And so,
after working at third floor, you were doing post-viz?
Post-viz and some previz.
And some previz on Infinity War, and you leave that and you're like, I still didn't know that much.
Yeah, because what I had known at that point was what I knew about finals animation in Blender and previz animation in Maya. But I didn't really know about, probably didn't know what Arnold was. I'd never heard of Houdini. I'd never heard of RenderMan at that point. I knew cycles.
Yeah.
I don't think I even knew what Nuke was at that point. So it's like my first week of unemployment. I'm ready to collect that government handout and work on my projects. But you have to actively try to find work in order to get unemployment. And so of course I'm going to do that. And so I sent out my resume and my newly constructed demo reel to Barnstorm, which I knew was a VFX company.
Okay.
And they replied. and I was like, oh, and I think you have to take whatever work you get. And I was like, okay. But you actually don't have to. But I didn't know that. And you probably should.
Yeah.
And so, the interview went great. And I was like, shit.
Got another job. Nuts.
And then I was like, okay. And so I went in for the in-person interview. And it was going good. They were like, hey, we have this, and like, have you done plane animation? I was like, well, I've animated a bunch of spaceships. And they're like, great, we need a guy to animate planes and ships. And I was like,
it's too good of a match.
I was like, goddamn, and I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll get hired in a month. Like I got hired at all the other companies. I had to wait like a month.
There you go.
And then they were like, well, can you start Monday? And I was like, sure. Shut.
That is funny.
Because I was so afraid of if I did say no, I wouldn't have work maybe in a couple of months.
Right, absolutely.
But man, oh man, that was great because I learned so freaking much. Whoa. Even my first couple of weeks there, I was like, what's an Alembic? Oh, you can cache stuff outside of Blender? I had no idea you could do that. I was caching only stuff, I think, in Blender at that moment. I had no idea you could go in between programs.
Oh, whoa.
When I say I didn't know that much, I was able to survive that.
I see what you mean.
Avengers knowing a certain amount of knowledge.
You couldn't jump between programs. Whoa.
And that was all like a mystery to me.
Yeah.
I thought you had to animate and render by that point, So that was pretty hilarious.
When you got to Barnstorm, were they using Blender at all?
Oh, yeah. We were still using Cycles as our main renderer.
Whoa.
Yeah, so it was our full 3D package. We were not compositing. We were using Nuke to composite. I was on the top floor in a tiny little room we called the clubhouse with, I think, 6 other guys. Okay. And there's no windows. I did like working with that crew in that room, but it was very different than working at Robot Chicken and third floor, which was like Robot Chicken. It's like Robot Chicken. And, the humor is so wild that you felt very, there was no eggshells all the time. You could say whatever you want. It was kind of like being at camp.
Oh, that's what you mean.
Or being in, I was never in theater camp, but I could imagine being in theater club or something where it's just balls to the walls, And then third floor, it's a bunch of animators. They're, to me, kind of comparable to composers. They're very irritable, animated people who can be, some people are kind of introverted, but
sure.
I find animators versus effects artists versus compositors, I feel like animators are more of the livelier of VFX artists.
Yeah, okay.
So third floor was a fucking blast. And we were working on Avengers, so it was fun. We played hacky sack every lunch. It was a good time. And so then we were in this little room.
No windows on the top floor.
Yeah, it was a small, I can't remember what the office it was before then. That was our old office.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, so... but at that point, I was brought in, so planes, right?
Yeah.
I was brought in to work. If you've seen some of the Barnstorm stuff, we did this big Statue of Liberty destruction sequence.
Yeah.
And that was what I was brought in on.
Oh, okay.
And so I animated the jets and the missiles. And then at the time, my supervisors were, smart enough to know, well, we're not going to try to sim the main statue falling over. We'll do all the debris pieces blowing off of it in sim, but we're going to art, direct, and animate the statue falling over. Okay. And that's what I did. So I also animated the statue falling over.
Whoa, okay. Pretty big deal.
Which is kind of funny because the jets you think would be the hard part, but the hard part was getting this slow little listing movement. And so in my talk, I had a little clip of Family Guy where it's from the Star Wars special they did. Like, Han goes, "Don't worry, I can outmaneuver these Star Destroyers. I have a few maneuvers," and they list slowly to the left. And then Chris Griffin, who's Luke, and he goes, "That was your maneuver?" Listing slowly to the left. And that's how I got an Emmy nomination, was listing a statue slowly to the left. And so I didn't mention this in the talk because it's just going to be too confusing. I think I was talking about this yesterday.
Okay.
I actually went to Infinity War, then Barnstorm, and then back to Endgame for a little bit.
Oh,
and
that's
then
right.
came back to Barnstorm.
Yeah. Okay.
And what was funny is when I got back to Endgame, I had an Emmy nom.
Whoa.
And everyone was like, Chris left for like 6 months and then came back with a friggin' Emmy. How does that happen?
That's crazy. Whoa.
And so that made me look really cool when I was on Endgame.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So after that, and I showed him in my talk, during that show, we had this other amazing, this guy is like the best. I love this guy. Okay. Nick Chamberlain, who's a jack of all trades. I think the only thing he doesn't do is animation, which is funny because that's my sort of frame or starting point.
Yeah.
He was hired by Barnstorm, I think a few months before I got there, and he basically, like I introduced Blender to Robot Chicken, he basically introduced Houdini to Barnstorm and Arnold. And so we started really get into Houdini Arnold and really started to get into the Blender to Houdini workflow, which I think is kind of one of the really cool new popular workflows out there.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Really, probably the most popular workflow, right, is now Maya to Houdini, I think. At least, at the prosumer level, because every, the big guys like Weta and ILM, they probably have their own proprietary thing. Yeah. But for like mid-level and lower houses, I think, the really popular one is Maya to Houdini or Blender to Houdini. And so in that Statue of Liberty scene, we actually rendered the statue. That was Arnold, but the jets and the boats and the water was Cycles.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And so as we started to kind of continue, we started to phase out Cycles because we were running an Arnold board, but we were still using Blender heavily to do modeling, rigging, and animation. And then eventually, now to where we are, Blender 2.8 came out, and I started to use Eevee to do previs and post-viz because I had been doing previs and post-viz at third floor, and I was like, okay, well, I really want to see what we can do with Eevee and real-time rendering and real-time kind of comping too in Eevee. Now, when I say real-time comping, I mean doing like tricks in Eevee, not actually using the compositor.
Oh, I see what you mean. Wow.
Because if you project onto a plate, you could like mask out the plate and then have someone walk through, kind of like Ian Hubert style.
I did catch that slide that you were talking about.
Yeah. So that was a pretty cool thing.
A very powerful workflow.
Yeah.
Wow, dude. We do try to aim for an hour. I don't mean to keep you longer than this, but this has been... Anyway, I'm trying to think how do we wrap it up if I have any last questions. But
I was trying to get to that point because I feel like that was, kind of where we are now. We're still using Blender. People are curious about Barnstorm, although in a limited capacity. We are actually a Maya to Houdini workflow. Okay. But we still use, at least in my department, some of the shows that I CG supervise, and it's not just me, like Corey and Lawson, they still like Blender, and every now and then they'll see workflows, especially LA incentivized shows, because we have Vancouver branches and New York branches, right? And a lot of those guys and gals, those are Maya people. So when we want to do a show from Maya to Houdini, we get that tax incentive, which is great, because they can do the whole thing up in Vancouver.
Oh, I see.
So when we get like an LA incentivized show, it's like, okay, maybe we can use the cool Blender to Houdini workflow that in a lot of ways I helm the Blender portion of that.
Wow, okay.
So just to give a sort of a clarification, because I think a lot of people think we just use Blender.
I appreciate that. I saw the Barnstorm presentation or maybe just the demo reel of Man in a High Castle, and it was very tightly associated with Blender. So I wondered if it was the whole thing. But, it's rare to see only one software ever. So yeah, it makes sense to clarify. And I'm a fan of you. I've met you yesterday, but like fascinated by your story. History is like always one of my favorite subjects in school. And so going through the stages and like the garnishes of what software was being used when, and like how you got into these roles.
It's so weird and interesting.
It is. It's fascinating.
The development of it.
So I appreciate you going through that and giving people an idea of a very unique, I feel like, journey from you and some like physical interaction that blows my mind in a digital world. So Chris, thank you so much for doing this and sitting down, taking the time right after your talk. It's been a blast, and hopefully we catch up again sometime at a conference or something. Our paths cross, but I really appreciate you and your time.
Hey, appreciate it. Man.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks again to Chris Parks for his time and insight. If you're interested in leveling up your Blender skills and supporting what we do at CG Cookie, check out our extensive library of courses at cgcookie.com. If you own a business or you work somewhere interested in onboarding Blender, make your way to orangeturbine.com. That's all for this episode of Denoise. Thanks so much for listening.